Hello and welcome to our virtual reality meeting experience. Thank you so much for coming in to this today, and I hope you've had a brilliant time at MonsterComm so far and listening to all the amazing talks that we've had. My personal highlight was Stephanie. I thought she did a fantastic talk, and it was great to see just how amazing Oco Health is. And yeah, so thank you for coming along to this just before the treasure hunt. I know everyone's excited about that. So yeah, welcome to our virtual office. We're in the middle of the city. As you can see, we've got a nice load of buildings behind us, and this is where we come and have some of our monthly meetings. But the best thing about virtual reality is that you don't necessarily need to be in the city like a normal office. You could be by the lake, or you could even be by the beach. So you've got this nice calming backdrop, and this is where a lot of our team come and work in small groups and just have somewhere that's a little bit cozy than maybe they're used to working from home or in co-working spaces. And this layout here is our lecture hall layout. So this is where we have our monthly team meetings. As you can see, it's a row of seats, and on this side is a speaker platform where you can go and talk to the whole team. And this room magically gets bigger the more people that are joining. So there'll be more rows added on. So it can house up to, I think, 20 people in this room, and then a further 50 joining by the web link that you're on right now. So it's a great way for us to have everybody together, to make some company announcements, to discuss, to chat about what's coming next. But let's say we wanted to have something a bit more like in smaller groups, or we've got a workshop, or we're doing something creative, then we might use the breakout space, which, as you can see, is a number of tables that again will magically grow depending on the number of people in the room. And because our headsets have spatial audio, you can only hear the person or the people who are really close to you. So if two people are sat at opposite ends of the room, they're not going to hear that conversation. So it really does allow you to have breakout spaces, smaller group conversations, and then you can go back to a bigger room layout to feed back to the team to kind of have those bigger group discussions. But for the purposes of this talk, we'll go back to a conversational layout. Great, so thank you for coming today and listening to me talk about virtual reality. So we use virtual reality day to day in WordMonster. It's part of how we handle meetings. It's part of how we brainstorm and connect socially. And in this talk, I'm going to take you through a bit of our journey, how we reached using virtual reality day to day. So I'm going to first cover what is virtual reality and what it's like in comparison to some of the other extended reality media available. We'll take a brief look at the history of VR, where it started, where it's come from, and where it is now. We'll look at what's happening in the world of VR, where it's being used, and then especially in healthcare, who's using it and why. We'll then talk about how we're using VR here at WordMonster. What are the benefits to us as a remote first team, and then we'll look towards the future and see what's coming next, especially how maybe you can use it in your agencies or to connect to your remote working teams. So first of all, what is virtual reality? So simply, it's the idea of immersion. So a virtual reality headset allows you to be fully immersed in a computer-generated world. With a headset on, you can't see anything else. I can't see my desk, I can't see my keyboard, I can't see my chair, which means I'm very, very close to bumping into it. So I've got to be very careful. but you are fully immersed in this environment, and it simulates real life context, situations that allows you to experience something completely new. And it's different to some of the other extended reality platforms out there. So extended reality is the bracket term for virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. And while VR is the art of immersion, augmented reality is the art of implanting digital content onto the real space. So for example, if anyone's used TikTok and has used one of the TikTok filters, and they've looked into the camera and seen something magically appear over their face, that is a real world example of augmented reality. In addition, you can hold up a tablet to your real world and see digital content implanted onto the real world behind you. It's been used in things like drone flying, where you can see augmented reality targets that you can fly through, and it's been used in kind of entertainment and gaming. Mixed reality is a bit of a blend of the two, and we'll talk about that as we go into the future technologies. But it's a headset or a device that can allow you to be fully immersed in an environment and also augment digital content onto your real world. And it is potentially the future of where we're headed with the headsets that like the one I'm wearing now. So just looking at the history of virtual reality, in our timeline here, we cover the times from 1956 to the modern day. But the idea of virtual reality actually goes back another 100 years, where someone called Charles Wetton invented the stereoscopic glasses. And this was a technique of using our binocular vision to create a single vision in front of our faces. And that was in the 1830s, so a long way before anything like what I'm wearing was created. And then another 100 years later, in the early 1900s, virtual reality started to become prominent in science fiction. So with authors like Weinbaum prophesizing, talking about how virtual reality might become commonplace in the future and used in all manner of different situations. But it wasn't until 1956 where Morton Heilig created a machine called the Sensorama. Now, this is 1956. Machines were big, and the Sensorama was no different. It was a huge bit of kit that could fit up to 4 people, but it had everything that you would imagine from a virtual environment. It had virtual images, virtual audio. It even had wind effects with air coming out, and it had different smells. And it's very, very similar to kind of some of the 4D cinemas you might see at Blackpool. It was designed to create a feeling of immersion. And then in 1965, Ivan Sutherland, who many say is like one of the pioneers of the technology, he described the ultimate display of a virtual world. And this was the idea that eventually, sometime in the future, that virtual reality would become indistinguishable from the world that we're in now. And that would mean that touch would feel real, and the food that we would eat would be real food, and even a bullet would kill you in real life, which is a bit scary that somebody was thinking about that in 1965. And I hope we're a long way off that becoming a reality. In 1987, the term virtuality became more popular, and in that bracket between 1965 and 1987, virtuality was researched really heavily in engineering, aeronautics, where simulations were used to virtual simulations helped people run dangerous kind of practices for flying, models for prototyping, and that this was all kind of people investing in the technology. And in 1991, NASA used virtual reality to drive a robot on Mars, and the technology accounted for the time differences between Earth and Mars, and they were able to drive it in real time, which is a phenomenal achievement in the early 90s. At that time as well, the first mass-produced VR entertainment system was made, and again, it was ginormous. You had to sit in it and pull a headset down, but it was the first stages of VR becoming present in the consumer world. And then between the early 90s and about 2012, 2014, a lot of entertainment companies were really trying to invest in VR and make it work on a consumer level. People like Nintendo, Sony, Google were all really trying to get VR to work, really trying to put it in the hands of the consumer, but the technology just wasn't quite there to make it viable. You couldn't create worlds realistic enough for people to kind of get excited about, and the technology wasn't really there. In 2012, a small company released a prototype on Kickstarter for the Oculus Rift, and it got a huge amount of money, millions of dollars in Kickstarter funding. And then a few years later, it was released, and this was the kind of the headset that started everything from then on. Facebook invested in it, they bought it. It's now the Meta headsets that, like the one I'm wearing. And then companies suddenly realized that VR was accessible. This is a headset that somebody can really wear. It's not a huge bit of kit. It's not doesn't require a massive machine behind you. And so you had companies like HTC creating the Vive, Lenovo creating headsets, Microsoft creating the HoloLens. It really kickstarted a huge drive in companies investing in the technology and trying to be the first to have the world-beating headset that everyone wants to buy. But the Oculus did really nail it. And one of the only drawbacks for that at the time was that you had to have a really high-spec PC running the software. It wasn't a standalone headset. You needed to be cabled up. And I remember going to conferences about 10 years ago, taking a massive flight case with all of this kit packaged in, and we had to have 2 computers, one being a spare in case the other one broke, 2 headsets, and it was just, I'd get to the airport sweaty, I'd have to run across terminals with this huge box. So I'm very glad now that you have something like the Quest 2, which came along in the last year or the year before, where it's completely standalone and you don't need any wires or cables, and you can use your hands. You've got the remotes, but it's a lot easier. It's a lot more transportable and accessible. So that's where we are. You have these standalone headsets now, and graphically, they're not the most powerful, but they're good enough to generate a digital world that you can believe is real. You do feel immersed in it. It does make you have physical reactions. Like if you were to drop off a ledge, it would make your stomach go. So that, the technology is starting to get better and better. And there's definitely some exciting things to come, which I'll talk about towards the end of the talk. So now we've looked at where VR has come from. It's good to kind of see where it's being used. And there's sort of 4 major buckets, apart from kind of the entertainment side of things and gaming, where VR is being used. And I would say one of the biggest is learning and education, because the idea of virtual reality offers so many opportunities for companies, for potentially dangerous occupations, to practice, to run simulations in an environment that just isn't dangerous at all. So if you can imagine, let's say the fire service, they have in the UK at least buildings where they can practice going in to tackle house fires. But let's say the fire service have to go and put out a fire on a plane or a boat. There's no safe place for the majority of firefighters to train on those pieces of kit. Whereas something like virtual reality could provide that scenario. So you could go out to a boat, you could tackle a fire, you could work with your teammates, you could encounter situations that you wouldn't normally face, and practice that all from the kind of the safety and security of a training facility or even your own home. So there are so many opportunities for VR to be used in the learning space, to recreate dangerous situations, or even situations like we'll talk about in the healthcare space, where they're just so rare that it's not worth setting up a full training day for. The next area is prototyping. So again, you can probably imagine how useful VR is in this situation, where you could have people in different countries, in different research facilities, all looking at the same prototype. Let's say it's a new car, a new motorbike, a new piece of technology like a new phone, and everyone's looking at the spec or even like the engine itself, the device itself, and you can in real time change the color, change the size, maybe even run simulations of the machine running, tweaking little bits of the physics or mechanics to see what would happen in the prototype that everyone's looking at. And then you could take the findings away and then tweak it offline as well. So huge opportunities and uses around the prototyping industry. Customer service is one where I haven't seen real world examples of this, but or ones that kind of are commonplace. But the idea is that companies could elevate their relationship with their customers by providing a real place for the customers to come and ask questions, which is really exciting if you think about it. If you've got a problem with your tech, or you've got a problem with something at home and you want to talk to somebody in real life, you don't want to mess around with the call centers, they could invite you into their waiting room. They can make you feel like a valued customer and give you a good experience that then answers your question and makes you feel important. And this could be really tied with AI as well, with the advances of being able to create lifelike voices, lifelike interactions. AI in a virtual customer service room could be the first line of support for anybody wanting to kind of manage customer queries. And then you could then go on to speak to somebody in real life after that, even virtually or on the phone. And then finally, in travel marketing, you can imagine how useful it would be to see where you're going to be before you buy it. So let's say you before you get a holiday in the US or in the Philippines, you can see exactly where you're going to stay. You can see the kind of tour destinations that you would be taken to. You can even go on the walks that you might go on, and you can really get an idea of what this holiday is going to be like. And tour companies can use VR to get the buy-in for some of the bigger packages, maybe by showing exactly what they'll be looking at. So as we're a healthcare agency, it's important that we look at how VR is used in the healthcare space, and it's something we've done a lot of research into. And again, the sort of three buckets that this technology has been used in. So one of them is training, which we covered in the broader sense earlier. But for medical training, like I think this is being used, was one of the earliest adopters of VR technology was the healthcare space, specifically for training, because again, it allows you to practice potentially dangerous procedures in a safe environment. And you can imagine, for surgeons practicing very, very intense surgical operations or emergency situations that very rarely happen is something that's difficult to actually train. But in VR, you can have any number of situations that may never happen in a surgeon's lifetime, but they can practice, they can rerun it, they can have different types of patients, different vital statistics, different timings, and really understand what it might be like to be in those kind of life and death scenarios where there is no life and death on the line. And you might think, oh yeah, but it's virtual. It doesn't, you're not going to get the same kind of adrenaline rush, but you do really feel immersed in this world, and it's kind of hard to explain if you haven't tried it. But even just being in the same room as two other people and having a conversation, it feels like you're next to each other. It feels like you're interacting properly. And if you're running around and you're jumping off things, it feels like you're doing those things as well. So that being in something that's pressured, where you're having to react and deal with a patient that's right in front of you, I imagine you do get that sort of like a rush of adrenaline and focus that you would have in the real world. It's been a brilliant tool for patients to help them understand more about their disease, about the opportunities that are available to them. It's a great way for healthcare professionals to interact with patients, and it's been especially useful in the psychology space and counseling space. And I know there are companies out there who use VR to help patients overcome phobias. If it's heights or if it's spiders or flying, they can create simulations where you're tackling, increasing degrees of the phobia that you have, and it really helps to kind of you can imagine that it really helps to tackle that phobia by seeing it in a space where you're not in danger. It's also a great tool for pain management and physical therapy, and it's about like creating an environment where you're more likely to do the exercises, or you have help to do the exercises where somebody isn't in the room with you. And this is for somebody who's maybe got chronic back pain, who's had an injury, and he's doing some rehab. And typically, you'd get a sheet of paper or a YouTube video to follow, which would give you a series of exercises, which can sometimes be difficult to comply with. It's easy to not do them. Whereas if you've got a VR headset, you're in an immersive world and somebody virtually is taking you through exercises and stretches, then you may be more likely to do that therapy. It's more fun, it's more engaging, and ultimately will kind of improve your rehabilitation. So as I've said, that we use VR quite a lot in Word Monster. We use it every day, at least every week. And to sort of talk about how we use it and why we use it, is we have to sort of go a bit further back, because we've always been a remote working agency. We've always had people across the world working with Word Monster. And what Carl said earlier in his talk was that he's been really focusing, and we've been really focused on how we can keep our team engaged with each other, not just doing great work and having a great team around us, but also having the opportunity to make friends, having the opportunity to have conversations about things other than work. And we actually looked at VR, a couple of years ago with the original Quest headset, and we were trying to understand if it was the right time to bring in this technology and whether it would help connect everybody. And it just didn't feel quite right. The technology wasn't quite good enough. Workrooms, as you've seen it so far, wasn't quite there yet. And it wasn't until the Quest 2 came out and this software got an update that we were like, yeah, this is the right time. And in that time, our team had grown as well, and we were really just wanted to give everybody something that could help foster connection and help people have meaningful conversations outside of kind of the day-to-day project work and client work. And that's where the Quest 2 came in. We bought everybody a headset. We had our first monthly meeting in it, and everybody just said, "Wow, this is kind of incredible," because you suddenly sat next to somebody who's 200 miles away. You can have a proper conversation. We've been using it for co-working, where people can just come into this room and use their laptop through VR and actually be able to just chat and have conversations as if you were in an agency. We have all of our team meetings in this space. We've been able to have poker nights. We've done bowling. We've watched episodes of Bluey and Friends. It's just been such a great tool for getting everybody in the same room, even though we're not in the same room. We've even used it for our training, helping induct new starters. It's just been such a phenomenal tool for us, and we've only just scratched the surface of what it can do. Potential for us to go to live concerts, to create our own worlds in this space, and it's just I think for us as an agency, helping people have meaningful connections, develop friendships, bond, is all going to be possible through this headset. And this is kind of like the technology is only going to improve from here. So it is phenomenally exciting for us. So looking to the future, like what do we think is going to happen? Well, at the minute, I think that we've got some technological barriers to VR being in everybody's house. Even though it's standalone, even though there are no wires, even though you can see your own hands, there are some barriers that stop us and stop everybody else from kind of using it all day long. One of these is the weight, because everything's contained in the headset. It's slightly heavy, so you're probably only going to be able to use it for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and that's how long as well the battery life lasts. So you've only got a finite amount of battery. We're still working on, and they're still working on how to increase that battery life. But yeah, for the minute, you aren't able to use it that long in one go. The other side of it is that at the minute, this headset is kind of blocked off. You can't see the room in front of you. It has little cameras on the corners, and it can, to a certain extent, see the world around you, and it can map some content onto there. Like it can show you how I can move from my desk to the whiteboard. It can tell me when I'm about to hit something, and it can show me what that object is. But future technology is going to be able to really show your environment in full, like real terms, and even map content onto that space. And that's where headsets like the Vision Pro are going. And the Vision Pro is almost like glass fronted. So it will be able to create an immersive world around you and also augment content onto your real world. So you could be having a video call with somebody and they're trying to demonstrate how to rewire a plug, and you can see that plug in the digital space, but on your real world, and you'll be able to see arrows about which way to turn, which wire to put where, and it kind of, the opportunities for that are incredible. Every manufacturer is trying to make the graphics better, the headset lighter, and also improve the frame rate, and that's another key kind of concern or consideration with the tech at the minute, is that the frame rate isn't quick enough to match our real vision. And so if you're moving in real time, or you're on if anyone's ever done the roller coaster experience or F1 experience at an arcade, you feel motion sick instantly because your vision can't keep up with the movement, or the graphics aren't fast enough to mimic what your eyes really see. But in the newer headsets like the Apple Vision Pro, the Quest 3 that's been announced, those graphics have just been enhanced massively. So we might start to see that eye tracking get even better, and so we'll be able to free walk in VR, which causes problems at the minute. We'll be able to go on driving experiences, roller coaster experience. We'll be able to fly, and all of that will be able to be accessible by everybody, not just people who are able to sort of tolerate that eye discrepancy. So I think that's really the future. I think it's going to be technologically driven. I think in a couple of years, everyone's going to have a headset that really allows them to have that mixed reality feel where they're able to see their content, they'll be able to share content with their family. So it's not as isolating at the minute as putting on a headset and not being able to see people in your room. You'll be able to have family time where 3 or 4 people are wearing headsets, all seeing the same thing, all able to interact with it. For the workplaces, I think it's going to be an essential tool to connect remote workforces, and you'll be able to have bigger and better spaces for people to occupy. So I think it's a great time to invest in the technology. I think it's a great time to be part of the VR revolution as such, and see where it's going to go over the next few years. So the big question is, are you ready for virtual reality? Hopefully this small talk has helped you get an understanding of where VR has come from, how it's being used now, and what the potential is for the future. I would strongly recommend looking into VR, especially if you've got a remote workforce, especially if you're handling prototypes or designs or anything that can be worked on collaboratively. It's such a great tool for connection, for engagement, for co-working, and it's only going to get better. So if you've got any questions, feel free to drop me a line. You can use the UK@wordmonster.agency, or you can message me directly on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to talk VR with anybody, especially like exploring how it can be used for your agency or your company. So yeah, thank you again. And if anybody's got any questions in the room, please feel free to ask. But yeah, that's the end of my talk.